Chicago during 1919 was not the Chicago we know today. Chicago is a very diverse city that we know and love. This was not the case back then. After World War I, returning soldiers found that all of the migrated black people have taken most of their jobs. This sparked racial tensions throughout the city of Chicago. In 1919, the whole city was segregated. Racial tensions were very high, and people were violent and prejudiced. This led to the race riots occurring. The race riots were 7 days of fighting, high racial tensions, and burnings. The Chicago Defender has been around since 1905 and was founded by Robert Sangstack Abbott. The Defender was one of the first black newspapers in Chicago. It is of great historical importance not only for that reason, but because of its honest reporting. Throughout its existence, the Chicago Defender has stood up for African Americans all around Chicago, and particularly during the 1919 Chicago race riots. It has done this by promoting equal rights like integration in sports, anti-lynching, and speaking the truth throughout its articles. The Defender was one of the very few honestly reporting on the race riots, even while other newspapers were not. During the 1919 race riots, the Defender had an active role in influencing the actions of African American people through its articles. In the end, people all over Chicago had been enlightened to what was happening between races because of the Chicago Defender's honest reporting. The Defender helped African American people to achieve their goal of equal rights, even though it did not happen all right away. The catalyst for the race riots happened on a hot summer day when one black boy crossed an invisible segregated swimming line. Angry, some white boys threw stones at him. It is unclear if the stones hit him or the raft, but regardless, he drowned. Many black people went to a policeman asking him to arrest the people who had thrown the stones, but they refused. Upon the complaint of one white person, the policeman arrested a black guy. The drowning soon spiraled into a riot. This riot, combined with the riots all around the country, had been branded the Red Summer of 1919. During the Red Summer, the homes of black people got torched. Black people could not walk through white neighborhoods without fear of being assaulted. Carl Sandburg was an influential news reporter and journalist for the Chicago Daily News. He was one of the few, as well as the Chicago Defender, who wrote about the race riots accurately. Back then, most necessary facts were left out of the stories to cover up what was really happening. If it weren't for the Chicago Defender or Sandburg, we wouldn't know the true story behind the race riots. Even before the Chicago race riots, the Defender had been influencing African Americans in other major events in history, like the Great Migration, which started in 1915. According to Ethan Michelli, you had the things in the editorial page telling people a couple of things. Up to about 1916, the paper was saying, "Don't bother coming here, there are no jobs, the unions discriminate. If you come here, you'll just freeze." This was after the soldiers left for World War I. The factories, the slaughterhouses, and all of the employers in Chicago suddenly needed a lot of labor. The South was industrializing as well, so there were jobs in the South too. But Abbott saw that this was when black workers left the South for jobs in the North. It severely damaged the South because there was no one to do the work. And that's when the Defender started saying, now is a good time to come to North. Not just because there was economic opportunities here, but because it was damaging the Jim Crow South. This is just one of the examples of how the Defender has been influencing important events. On the Black Past website, it is mentioned that often after being smuggled to the South, it is estimated that many copies of the Defender were read by 4 to 5 African Americans who passed it around from person to person and read it aloud wherever blacks congregated. Included in its pages were articles and editorials which tried to convince its oppressed Southern readers to move north. Abbott even printed copies of train schedules and job listings to entice Southern blacks to relocate. The black population of Chicago increased 148% from 1910 to 1920, with plenty of support and encouragement from the Defender. This is one of the major techniques that the Defender was using to encourage the Great Migration. A more recent article by the Defender stated that the Chicago Defender supported the Great Migration caused Southern readers to migrate to the North in record numbers. It was because of the Defender that all of these people migrated north and got jobs. As this shows, the Defender has been influencing the actions of African Americans, even before the race riot started.
The Defender has supported African American people in getting equal rights, and its severity to help stand up and stop unequal treatment. It continued to advocate for equal treatment even when some people disliked it. When the Defender reported about the drowning of Eugene Williams, they stated facts without any biased opinions. Although it may have angered white people, the facts were there. In an article written by Ethan Michelli, he wrote, "In May, the Defender printed a letter from a white resident of Waco, Texas, a witness to the horrific murder of a 17-year-old named Jess Washington. The letter writer was outraged by what he had seen. A mob of 15,000 to 20,000 men and women intermingled with children and babies in their arms, gathered to torture Washington and then burn him at the stake. When the Defender published this letter, they left it whole, rather than editing out certain parts. When in another newspaper, it stated that in Vicksburg, in the third week of June, the story goes, a colored man accused of an assault on a white woman was placed in a hole that came to his shoulders. Earth was tapered around his neck, only his head being left above the ground. A steel cage 5 feet square then was put over the head of the victim, and a bulldog was put inside the cage. Around the dog's head was a paper bag filled with red pepper to inflame his nostrils and eyes. The dog immediately lunged at the victim's head. Further details were too gruesome to print. If this story had been published in a Defender, its readers would have been given all the facts, no matter how gruesome, because the Defender is an honest reporter. Finally, the Defender gave the victims and people who wanted equality a voice by speaking out about hate crimes. The majority of hate crimes committed were car flippings, drownings, shootings, lynchings, stonings, beatings, black people being set on fire, and so many more. The Defender wrote about the victim's point of view, even when it was not widely appreciated by the whites. Even though the Defender received threats, it continued to write and distribute its newspapers. This is how the Defender has stood up for the rights of African American people. As a result of the race riots and the Chicago Defender's honest reporting, new light was brought to the racial tensions throughout Chicago. Overall, in 1919, economic, political, and social tensions caused 78 lynchings across the country, more than any year since then. The Defender utilized these tensions to illustrate the necessity of equal rights. From 1905 to 1925, the paper served as a voice of the entire race. This shows how strong and influential the Defender is, even though it is an African American run newspaper. And at the time, African Americans were considered second class. The Defender gave African Americans hope in a dark time where white people did not appreciate them, even hating them. As a result of the light brought to racial tensions, the Chicago Commission on Race Relations was created. The commission wrote a book called The Negro in Chicago. It was written in the book that the commission was appointed by the governor of Illinois to study the cause and cure for then the recent Chicago outbreak, and the similar clashes between the races. This commission was a direct result of the riots and was made to diagnose the cause of the riots so it could be prevented. The major reason that the commission came into existence was because of all the racial tensions, and these tensions were unearthed by the Defender. This shows that because of the Defender, other races were showed that African Americans could do many good things.
The aftermath of the rioting and the revelation of all the racial unrest that the Defender unearthed caused some people to try to implement zoning laws to segregate housing in Chicago and making restrictions so that blacks couldn't work alongside whites in the industries. The Chicago Commission on Race Relations was created to look into the root causes of the riots and combat them. According to History.com, the commission, which included 6 white men and 6 black, suggested several key issues, including competition for jobs, inadequate housing options for blacks, inconsistent law enforcement, and pervasive racial discrimination, but improvement in these areas would be slow in the years to come. White people were upset by the message that the Defender was giving because they were against integration and the Defender promoted it. Without the Defender, people would not have been able to have a voice to speak out and to promote and help the commission and even other changes made to try and restore order due to the riots. The Defender, being as honest as it is, has stated the facts, which has led it to inspire future newspapers. One example of a long-term effect of the Defender's reporting of the riots is that today we don't discriminate anymore. We know that everyone has equal value and that their religion or skin color or beliefs don't change that. As you can see, the reporting of the Chicago Defender has had a positive effect on African Americans and how Chicago views other races. The Defender has promoted equal rights like integration in sports, anti-lynching, and has spoken the truth in its articles. Throughout the race riots, the Defender was honestly reporting the situation, even while other newspapers were not. As a result of this honest reporting, the Defender had a role in influencing the actions of African American people as well as other races. The race riots, coupled with the Defender, have made us realize the amount of damage discrimination can do to our society. Without the Defender, many African Americans would have had no hope, no voice, and no one to speak up for them and with them against the violence. Although African Americans didn't get their rights immediately after the riots, their stand against the unjust, along with the help of the Chicago Defender, would make it possible in the years to come.